my gosh, we're totally back. We're totally back. This is totally crazy. It's been so long. I honestly was wondering if I was ever going to make another Down the Rabbit Hole again. But here we are.
Yippee! Hooray!
So, this is actually a very full circle moment for me. My first semester of college, I was in a public speaking course, and I did a speech on whether or not President Trump was within his presidential rights and power to deploy the National Guard to cities that were experiencing 2020 riots at the time. I came to the conclusion after much research that yes, objectively, he was within his rights to deploy the National Guard to these burning cities. When I got my grade back, I was marked off on certain places in the rubric that I went, wait a second, I did these things. I had these details and I did this type of argument and I researched and cited my sources, whatever. When we were remote at the time, of course. When I emailed my professor asking, why did I get marked off on all these areas because I did XYZ, she never responded. She never talked to me about it. She never said a single thing, but she just quietly, sort of under the table, raised my score. So I think we all know what happened there.
Please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore.
But anyway, I am back to talk once again about the National Guard, and clearly I'm an expert because I've done this before. So, welcome back to Down the Rabbit Hole. Let's jump right into it. So, a little bit of context for those who don't totally know what's going on. Wait a second, first, look at the new set look. Okay, anyway, a little bit of context for those who don't know entirely what's going on. Donald Trump, in the past month, the executive order related to this came out on August 11th, so it actually has been a few weeks now, deployed the National Guard in Washington, D.C., to combat crime. And people lost their ever-loving minds. It's a threat to democracy. It's putting all of us in danger.
Free now. You free, say she. Free now.
But let's break down what's really going on. So to begin, I think we should first establish why the president is doing what he's doing, and that'll help us kind of break everything down from there. So if we go into the executive order released by the White House on August 11th, 2025, entitled Declaring a Crime Emergency in the District of Columbia, we get some nice intel here. The magnitude of the violent crime crisis places the District of Columbia among the most violent jurisdictions in the United States. In 2024, DC averaged one of the highest robbery and murder rates of large cities nationwide. DC now has a higher violent crime, murder, and robbery rate than all 50 states. DC is, by some measures, among the top 20% of the most dangerous cities in the world. So, first thing we need to address, when people were opposing the National Guard, or as people have been opposing the National Guard being deployed in DC for the purposes of fighting crime, like a superhero, for the purposes of fighting crime, one of the things that's constantly being stated is, well, but the crime rate has been declining in DC over the past however many years.
I guess I was wrong. There was no danger at all.
To that, I say this. I know that these numbers are not statistically accurate, whatever, but it helps me put it this way, and hopefully it helps you. If your crime rate is a 90 out of 100, and it's been declining over 4 years, 10 years, whatever, and now it's an 88 out of 100, that's still really, really bad. Even if you cut your crime rate in half, if it's still more violent than just about every single city, if not every single city in the rest of the country, that's still a problem.
What?
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 If the policies that you're implementing to fight this crime problem are working, why not get that extra little push in the right direction and lower crime more. And obviously, if your crime rates are still this high, even though they've been declining, you definitely need the extra little push. So I don't understand why we're so upset in that regard. The other qualm is that it's usurping, I think I said that right. The National Guard is usurping the Metropolitan Police Department, or MPD, their power in DC and just undermining them, and now trust is low and everybody feels really unsafe.
It's mine, you understand? Mine, all mine!
Okay. In section 2 of his executive order, Trump had this to say: I determine that special conditions of an emergency nature exist that require the use of the MPD of the District of Columbia for federal purposes, including maintaining law and order in the nation's seat of government, protecting federal buildings, national monuments, and other federal property, and ensuring conditions necessary for the orderly functioning of the federal government. So to break this down, Donald Trump is declaring an emergency state in Washington, D.C., and therefore reasoning that the deployment of the National Guard in D.C. is necessary because that is what is needed to respond to this emergency state happening. In response to this, as I already said, everyone went absolutely crazy. We have this wonderful, beautiful headline: President Trump's recent actions in Washington, D.C. are an abuse of power and threaten public safety for all because they're cracking down on crime.
That's true.
I feel really unsafe when troops are cracking down on crime. This is in the article. Section 740, which is what President Trump was invoking, gives the president only limited and temporary powers to direct the mayor to provide the services of MPD for federal purposes after the president determines that special conditions of an emergency nature exist. Authority over the MPD lapses after just 48 hours unless the president notifies Congress, and a joint resolution is required to extend the authority for more than 30 days. Representative Anna Paulina Luna of Florida has already introduced a resolution to extend beyond the 30-day period. Then they say that the Trump administration tried to control the MPD away from the city's police chief, blah, blah. I mean, a move that the U.S. Department of Justice agreed to walk back after negotiations required by a federal judge. So, from everything I've seen, the police are actually absolutely digging what the National Guard is doing. I did not fact check this whole thing, but this is why we have separation of powers. If it was a problem, the judge came in and said no, and they were like, okay, no, we won't do it. So everyone can calm down a little bit. So a national emergency has been declared, or a state emergency. An emergency has been declared by the president, and so he is sending in troops. According to this Home Rule Act, the president does have the authority to do so. As written here from Brookings, what's the president's legal basis for sending National Guard troops to DC streets? They have a nice little breakdown here. Washington, D.C. is unique because it has a different relationship with the federal government than U.S. states. Unlike state guards that report to the state governor, the D.C. National Guard reports to the President of the United States. The president can call out state National Guards to combat insurrections, domestic violence, invasions, and natural disasters. And then, of course, because governors from other states, I say other states, D.C. isn't a state, governors from Republican states, or at least Republican governors from presumably Republican states, are sending in National Guard, or sending their National Guard troops to help bolster up the DC National Guard. So just to put this at rest, the federal government is obligated to protect U.S. states against invasion by other U.S. states. To clear this up, the Republican governors are not invading DC.
Prepare to charge!
Sir, we haven't been given that order.
Charge!
They're sending more troops under the authority of the president to continue what the president is doing. No one's trying to stage a coup over Washington, D.C. That's not happening. That's just not a thing. So, no. No. The other law that comes into play, because the Home Rule Act does say, no, D.C. is not a state. They don't get their own National Guard under the mayor.
You can't sit with us!
National Guards are under governors. Thank you very much. Is the Posse Comitatus Act. I hope I'm saying that right. Who really knows? Posse Comitatus. It must be, maybe it's Latin? I should know this. As a good Catholic, I should know this. Posse Comitatus revisited the use of the military in civil law enforcement. Congress, by legislation, has allowed the use of the military in cases of domestic violence, protection of federal property, and enforcement of some federal laws and court orders. So this is exactly, right off the bat, this is exactly what the president has been saying in his executive order. It's domestic violence, crazy crime rates, protection of federal property, I think he said that like word for word, and enforcement of some federal laws and court orders. The Posse Comitatus Act really doesn't impede on Trump's ability in this circumstance to deploy the National Guard. So that's that. It was passed really to prevent U.S. Marshals from using the armed forces and deploying them into states for their own sort of gain, I suppose, and whims and such. So there's no coup. We're not having coups. Oh, it says it here. The Posse Comitatus Act was expressly intended to prevent United States Marshals on their own initiative from calling on the Army for assistance in enforcing federal law. The act has served the nation well in limiting the use of the armed forces to enforce the law. However, by its express terms, this act is not a complete barrier to the use of the armed forces for a range of domestic purposes, including law enforcement functions, when the use of the armed forces is authorized by act of Congress or, ladies and gentlemen, a very important conjunction.
Conjunction, junction, what's their function?
Or the president determines that the use of the armed forces is required to fulfill the president's obligations under the Constitution to respond promptly in time of war, insurrection, or serious emergency. But wait, there's more, because if we go back to the executive order, President Trump writes this: "As president, I have a solemn duty to take care that our laws are faithfully executed and a sacred responsibility to protect the safety and security of the United States citizens who live in and visit our nation's capital, including federal workers who live or commute into the District of Columbia. These conditions, the violent ones, cannot persist. We will make the District of Columbia one of the safest cities in the world, not the most dangerous." The Posse Comitatus Act allows for the president to use the armed forces in domestic areas of the U.S. in accordance with his obligations. And President Trump is saying, this is my obligation. I'm supposed to keep the federal government running smoothly. I'm supposed to protect the citizens. I am the head of the executive branch, which is the law enforcement branch of government. You need to enforce these laws. Which is a fair argument, I would say, personally. So anyone invoking that of like, oh my gosh, but the Home Rule Act, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're totally wrong. Posse Comitatus, yes, but no, because there are still allowances in that act for situations such as this. You know, if you want to bring in some insurrection acts, I mean, again, you're like, we're fine. He's fine. I say we. I'm not a part of this. After all of the whining and complaining and this is unconstitutional and a threat to democracy, which is wrong, after seeing how the buddy-buddiness of MPD and the National Guard played out, here's what the mayor of DC had to say.
We greatly appreciate the surge of officers that enhance what MPD has been able to do in this city. We know that when carjackings go down, when the use of gun goes down, when homicide or robbery go down, neighborhoods feel safer and are safer. So this surge has been important to us for that reason. The difference between this period, this 20-day period of this federal surge and last year represents a 87% reduction in carjackings in Washington, D.C. And we greatly appreciate the surge of officers that enhance what MPD has been able to do in this city.
But also, she decided, well, people feel very unsafe. even though the crime is going down, especially because of ICE agents, which have nothing to do with this. Literally.
I didn't see that coming, James.
Except for the fact that maybe if illegal immigrants are the reason that DC is so violent, which I know that there are violent illegal immigrants, but I think that there's a lot more to it in DC than illegal immigrants. But either way, y'all, come on.
Is not working is a break in trust between police and community, especially with new federal partners in our community. We know having masked ICE agents in the community has not worked, and National Guards from other states has not been an efficient use of those resources. I'm devastated by people living in fear. I think you know very clearly how I feel about our nation needing comprehensive immigration reform, about the Congress establishing a pathway to citizenship for hardworking people who came to this country for a better life and who are not criminals, who are law-abiding.
Then within days.
It has been across the spectrum of feedback. People who are, like me, outraged over the intrusion on our federal autonomy. People who, like me, see protecting home rule and our autonomy as our North Star are saying, keep making the right decisions, the tough decisions, and keep explaining what you're doing to DC residents. I have spent a lot of time talking about the Home Rule Charter, what it requires, and also talking about DC statehood.
You can't sit with us!
And how that is the only vehicle to us not having an intrusion on our autonomy.
What makes this funnier, though, is that by bringing ICE into this, she actually further cements the fact that President Trump is allowed to do what he's doing on interference with state and federal law and the president's ability to use the National Guard. The president, by using the militia or the armed forces or both, or by any other means, shall take such measures as he considers necessary to suppress in a state any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy, if it, 1, so hinders the execution of the laws of that state and of the United States within the state, that any part or class of its people is deprived of a right, privilege, immunity, or protection named in the Constitution and secured by law, and the state fails to protect it. Or 2, it opposes or obstructs the execution of the laws of the United States or impedes the course of justice under those laws. So, if
Congratulations, you played yourself.
If domestic violence, unlawful things, conspiracy, like trying to impede ICE using the police, which I think is happening in some cities, don't come at me. Or maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure people have been like, guys, we need to stop the ICE agents. The president is within his rights to send the National Guard into those areas to make sure that federal laws, the enforcement of federal laws, is not being hindered or impeded. Namely, for example, what ICE is doing. So just like let that sink in for a second. I just find it funny that in trying to make her case against federal agents in her city, she's actually further cemented the fact that the federal agents are allowed to be deployed into her city. Also, this would mean that in cities where ICE is being impeded, if that's still going on. I haven't honestly looked into it. I wouldn't be surprised if it is still going on, but one crisis at a time.
No. One crisis at a time.
The president could send in the National Guard to, help out ICE because they are opposing or obstructing the execution of the laws of the United States and impeding the course of justice under those laws.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
So that brings us to the final point of this discussion, which is that Trump has threatened to send the National Guard also into other cities like Minneapolis, Chicago, New York City, very violent places. I do think probably there is, given all of this, I'm sure there is a way to legally justify sending the National Guard into these places. I think we do need to crack down on crime. I think cities have gotten insane. I think the best case scenario, in Mary's ideal world, the best case scenario would be that the governors would see the success happening in DC, and instead of, no, actually, I hate that they're here, thanks for helping, but get the flip out of my city. Instead of that, they should say, hey, this is working. Let's see how we can put that into practice in our own city and help our citizens. If you are more concerned with political gain than the safety of those you are governing, you should not be governing. It's supposed to be public service, not personal gain. So,
boom, roasted.
I think that there is a way legally to do it. I don't know if it's the best course of action for Trump to just shove the National Guard in there. However, it is working in DC, so in a sense, I want to see it. But in another sense, I want the governors to be on board, especially because everything's better with teamwork, right?
Sure.
So that's kind of my take on it. My final thought would be this. We're so quick to try and twist everything into what we want it to be, whether we want it to be a good thing or we want it to be a bad thing, whatever serves us. But to sit here and say this is a threat to democracy, he's going to take over the cities, the governors have no rights, blah, 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 blah. No, it's wrong. Number one, it's wrong. And number two, you have nothing to base that off of. Nothing else has happened. In these very violent cities where the crime is so rampant that the police cannot keep up because it's just that bad, and because we're letting violent criminals go scot-free, because why wouldn't we? That's not the police's fault. Why wouldn't the governors want the help of the National Guard in quelling this? This does not need to be some big dramatic thing. It doesn't even need to take that long. We just need to get a handle on it and go from there. The troop police alliance has been extremely effective. So why wouldn't we continue it? The best way for this to happen is for the governors to hop on board and ask the president for help. Because we are one nation under God, not 50 nations and DC under God. Right? So instead of looking for cheap political shots in your own political gain, how about you just work with each other, put your differences aside, and put the people first? That's my take. Revolutionary, I know. Thank you so much for watching Down the Rabbit Hole. If you have a topic you want me to cover, either in the recent news or even in the culture, please let me know in the comments below. It really helps me out when people tell me what they want me to cover. It would be great. Again, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to share. Feel free to share your thoughts down below. Anyway. Okay, I think I'm done now.